Time, sejam muito bem-vindos à Lume Stack e eu tenho hoje a continuação daquele vídeo que a gente estava falando com o Mathew sobre toda a parte de como começar no LinkedIn, né? A gente falou ali sobre como você ser notado no LinkedIn, como deixar ele melhor, como você chegar em algumas vagas, né? Como você ir atrás de uma vaga que você quer muito, com quem que você fala, o que que você deve falar, né? E como pode mover isso para que fique mais fácil para o seu lado. Agora a gente vai falar daquela famosa entrevista com o Tech Recruiter, também conhecido como Screening Process, que é justamente o momento em qual você está tendo a sua primeira entrevista ali com um recrutador técnico. A gente vai falar o que que você deve perguntar, o que que você deve falar, as coisas que você deve evitar falar e as coisas que você tem que falar, tá certo? Até mesmo falando um pouquinho de inglês, né? O que que um recrutador técnico canadense espera de uma pessoa que fala inglês, né? O que que ela tem que saber falar, né? Como ela tem que falar, para que ela consiga passar para as próximas partes do processo. E eu gostaria muito de agradecer o Mathew. Mathew, thank you very much. Muito obrigado, de verdade. O Mathew foi incrível no nosso vídeo e de verdade eu espero que eu consiga trazer ele mais vezes aqui pra gente poder ver. Se vocês gostaram e querem que ele volte, né? Por favor, deixa aí o like, pô, deu mó trabalho. A gente teve que pegar um pouquinho do tempo do Mathew, que é um cara super concorrido. E, bem, ele deu ótimas dicas aí pra vocês. Então, eu sou o Manny, trabalho e moro no Canadá como QA Engineer e bora pro vídeo. All right, that's great. I have a few questions right now when we are doing the first interview, when we are talking with the tech recruiter, with the HR person that we are having the conversation. And I would like to know, what are the characteristics and qualities that you're trying to find on that screening? Because I really liked the first meeting with the HR. I feel like I always do good on this kind of interviews, but I would like to know, what are you searching for? Because usually I try to throw everything that I have onto the recruiter, but that's not the best way to do it. I would like to know what you think.
For sure. So I think before any interview, you need to spend time researching the company, the position, product market that they're in, maybe competitors of what they're doing, and understanding what you're applying for. I think these days it's very easy with the easy apply button to apply to 30 jobs. You have 10 phone calls, you do zero research, right?
Yeah.
Before going into it. So I think the first thing is, before the interview, spend the time to actually research the company and understand the space that they're in and what you're interviewing for. Once you have that and you're speaking to people, the more you're in the industry, the more experience, the different tools you've used and all of that stuff, you don't need to throw everything out and all at once, right? So I think by doing research and understanding what the company's doing and what industry they're in and what they're trying to achieve and what the role is, you can then take all of your experience and focus on the relevant stuff to this job. So I think that's something that's very, very important. And I think also answering questions directly is very important. And what I mean by that is that for any question, kind of like what I'm doing now, you could answer for very long periods of time and just kind of beat around the bush. But in an interview, you want to be clear and concise. So they ask you a question about a specific tool, I would answer the question about that tool, right? As opposed to going around the bush. And if you don't know an answer to something, it's okay to say, you know what, I haven't used that tool, but I've used these similar tools, or I have not used that tool, however, I'm willing to learn. Like, it's okay to be straight up about it versus beating around the bush. I think it's answering. So, and then, sorry, to answer the initial part of your question of what they look for, okay, on top of that, I think there's an aspect of, yes, can they do the job technically? So when they ask you questions about technicals, if you have it, great. If you don't have it, great. If you have it, where did you use it? That's how I would answer. They're also looking for communication. So how you speak to people, how you answer the questions. Are you friendly? Do you speak too quickly? Do you speak too slowly? Do you have a heavy accent? Do you ask them to slow down, or do you understand what they're saying? And can you answer clearly? So I think HR specifically looks at briefly technical, just to make sure that you fill in the 8 years of experience, 5+ years of XYZ tool, whatever, but they also filter for communication and culture fit. And so you're trying to get all of that in there in a half an hour phone call, which is kind of tough. But if you're answering questions clearly, if you aren't super nervous and you're able to talk about your past, and if you answer relevant questions, I think that's going to get the point across.
All right. Because there's a lot of people that maybe are a little bit scared when they are talking with the recruiters. And actually that I feel like that's the easiest part, at least for me, because I remember that, okay, I know that tech recruiter maybe knows something about JavaScript and automation because he needs to know, but it's not something that I need to shred in front of him, right? Like I don't need to say specific words, specific things. I just need to show them what I did with that and how long I'm using that tool or how long I'm using that technology that he's asking for, right?
Yeah, so to make it clear, IT recruiters, we're not coders, right? So as much as we want to understand how long you've used something, if you talk purely technical to me, that means you can't hold a normal conversation. You only know tech and you're just listing tools. That's not what we're looking for, right? So when they ask you about your experience, they're not asking you, oh, at my last company, I used XYZ and just like a bunch of buzzwords, right? They see your resume. But what they're asking for is I joined the company as the first automation engineer. I was there, I helped build the automations framework from scratch. I did the research, I did the design, and I architected the framework from scratch. It was a team of one, and these are the tools I used, right?
Perfect.
So being very clear of what you did there is what they're looking for in English. You have to break it down to like speaking with people in a conversation, not a technical interview where here I used XYZ tools, and that's it. People want to know who you did it at, in what context, right? And kind of breaking it down. For instance, if you're a developer, I'm a front-end developer. I was working on a team of 5. I was working on their growth marketing team, so I worked on their, I don't know, Shopify application or their checkout screen, and just painting a picture of what you did. Not saying, I'm a front-end developer, I'm using React, Redux, and you know what I mean? Like you want to elaborate a little bit on what you've done.
Yeah, like try to create environment when how you used it, right? It's easier for front end people because usually it's very shows up. But for automation, maybe that can be a little bit harder. But it's also a way to do that. There's also a way to do that very easily. Like talking about like coverage, talking about what are the features that you test and then how did you test and what types of tool you use it. But you don't have to be very precise. You just need to at least say if I'm wrong, but try to answer the requirements that you see on the job description and try to do that for the tech recruiter, right? Like
you could also again paint the picture. So if you say I joined a company where it was 80% manual, they had very little automation. They hired me to help them with automation. So I was with the company for 6 months or the last 8 years, whatever the number is, and within that time we brought it from 20% automation to 80% automation, and these are the tools that we used or I used.
Perfect.
Being specific, and I think that will help for sure.
Nice, great. I have a last question. I'm sorry to take all this time,
No,
but
all
it's
good.
been so good. Honestly, I'm very happy. Do you have any final advice that you would like to give? So try to think that you are talking to someone that you are really searching for, like a role you have that you need someone that is very specific. And like, do you have any advice for a person to how to show up, or I don't know, maybe we already talked about that, but how the recruiter can find this person and can like this person, even if it's a very specific one, or if it's a specific role that you need, how much percent of that role the requirements you have to achieve to be part of the interview? Because this is something very important. Sometimes the recruiters, they list all the tools that someone in the tech team is listing, but sometimes they are not even using that, right? How do you know which is important to know? And
Good question. I think this is a harder question to answer because every company is very specific and it depends on the company. For instance, if you're dealing with applying directly to the company itself, I would say that the years of experience may not be super relevant in the sense of if they're asking for 6 years and you have 5, I would still apply, right? That aspect. And you could kind of tell sometimes, for instance, if it talks about if they're a JavaScript shop, you can see by the job description, you know that they're using JavaScript related tool, and then somewhere there it says must have testing tools such as JavaScript, Nightwatch, Jest, Cypress, Protractor, as well as Java, Selenium, PyTest, Python. You can probably assume that the Java, Selenium, PyTest is not relevant because you could assume that they're using some sort of JavaScript testing tool.
Perfect.
Right? It's that's based on experience. Usually, you can get there. A junior person wouldn't be able to tell that. If you're applying through a consulting firm, So how consulting firms work is they hire you full time, and their job description is based on the end client's job description. So generally speaking, their requirements are more firm. So their job is to filter, and then they need to send it to the client. They almost fill out a matrix. What I mean by that is that if it says 8 years, they might really be looking for 8 years, and they might not consider you if it doesn't say 8 years on your resume, right? Because their job is to filter and then send it to the end client, which is more like pickier essentially, right? But if you're just going and applying, I would just apply rough 1 or 2 years there and back. 6 to 8 years is fine. Even if they don't accept it, I would still apply. A lot of times these days it says 8 to 10 years of experience. Honestly, not that many people have that experience, but not that many people have modern, like everything has changed in the last 10 years. Testing tools, they've all changed in the last 10 years. So it doesn't matter if you're 10 years of experience, you definitely didn't use any of the modern JavaScript testing tools, any of the mobile testing tools, right? Perfect. React Native wasn't around, so it's less relevant, right? So kind of, I guess, using some common sense. If you're a 1 year experience, likely don't go for 8+ years experience, but the more junior 1 to 3 years, stick to applying to those. The 3 to 6 years, stick to that, or the 5 to 8 years, like a couple of years back and forth, I think is fine.
All right, perfect. I'm sorry, I have one more question that I almost forgot.
Problem. Don't worry.
If there is a no English speaker native, what is your expectative about people speaking in English? Because there is people in Brazil sometimes are very, very afraid to apply for US and Canadian or European roles because they think that they don't speak well English. What do you expect when you talk with someone that is not like Canadian or American?
Yeah, so I think I've worked some roles in Brazil in the past, and it was actually a Canadian company or US company hiring in Brazil. They have their English C2, C1, advanced. There's like a grading system.
Okay.
So if you've done the English testing, you know what your current English skill set is, I would write that in your resume. It'll save time and energy for sure. That being said, there's a clear difference between people who have an accent and people who don't have good comprehension. So what I mean by that is that if you're practicing and you could understand me fluently, and you don't ask me to slow down or repeat myself, you have good comprehension. You understand people, because when you're working with a team outside of South America, it's likely going to be a lot of English-speaking people, and the goal is, and it's a team of 5 or 6 or 10, the goal is not everyone's going to slow down or repeat themselves in a call, right? So as long as you understand people and you could respond, even if you have an accent, but you don't ask, I think that's the baseline of what you need. If you need people to slow down, to repeat themselves multiple times, you're likely not capable of working with a North American team. That's where you're going to have problems. And then there's, I guess, a whole different conversation of how to get there. However, I think as long as that you could understand people and contribute, even if you have an accent, you're fine.
Perfect. Yeah. And when you say accent, like I have accent, and I know, like in Canada, I work with a bunch of different people. You know that not everybody are native. Actually, the most part of them are not. So they have like a very heavy accent. I try to do not have that heavy accent because it makes harder for communication. But there is people that it's even hard to understand. But at least in Canada, that I have this kind of experience already for almost 2 years, I don't feel that they really care. They don't really care. So
no one cares. Canada is all about immigrants. We hire, right? People we're bringing in. It's something like, I forget the numbers, crazy amount of people on a yearly basis. So it's not about the accent. No one cares about the accent. The issue comes when someone says, can you repeat yourself? Or can you slow down? Because in the real world, it's easy for me to slow down in a call. But in the real world, when you're speaking and working with 6 people in a meeting, you can't ask everyone to slow down just for you, right? And so the issue is this person going to work on our team? Is this going to be a fit? And I think that's where the clear differentiator is, right? Sorry, last thing on this topic.
Okay.
Easy stuff. On your resume, make sure the grammar is you have proper grammar, that there's no spelling errors. Everything looks good. The font is the same. You don't have different because you might have copy and pasted stuff. Make sure it's genuine what you have on there. But a lot of it sometimes is that it just doesn't look appealing. So on top of having good information and accessible information and all that, the resume needs to look good, right? If the resume
Yeah.
doesn't look good, it's going to be skipped as well. So I wouldn't have it bolded words and letters and the whole page. I don't have one with me, but the full range of context. You want to have a clean resume that explains what you've done, but also in a way that is readable, whatever whatever the word is for that, is appealing to the eye.
I got it. Perfect. Yeah, that's true. And I learned a lot. Like in Brazil, it's a little bit different for a resume. But if you are trying to start on a company on an A, right, North America, it's very important that you have a very easy to read resume. And usually there is a bunch of websites that have like templates that you can follow up. I think, if I'm not mistaken, you helped me out a lot to make my resume look better. So thank you about that. And and that's perfect to know. And Mathew, I want to thank you, like, for everybody. Mathew's a great guy. He's a great tech recruiter. He found me twice on a very, very good time. And and thank you for your time. Like,
Absolutely,
very, very much.
absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. I'm always available. If you have any questions or something, feel free to reach out anytime.
Let me ask you something. Do you want people to go and maybe do connection with you, or don't you think that's
sure? If they want to, feel free to connect. If they want to connect, no problem.
So perfect, guys. If you want, go to LinkedIn, Mathew Shulman. I know that you have the roles posted on your LinkedIn too. So if you take a look, maybe you are a very good match for him. So it will take some time from him to find a good person.
Yeah. Feel free to connect for sure. Thanks a lot.
Great. Thank you very much, Mathew, and have a great day. And see you guys.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Time, eu espero muito que vocês tenham gostado desse conteúdo, foi super legal fazer ele, ter o Mathew aqui como parceiro foi incrível, né, como nosso convidado. Eu espero que vocês tenham gostado e que tenham anotado tudo que ele passou, e se você tem comentários, dúvidas, né, por favor, deixa aí nos comentários, a gente vai ler todos e responder todos. E por favor, esse conteúdo foi super legal, eu acho que o Mathew deve ter ajudado demais vocês, então deixem o like aí, então vai ter um botãozinho aí de like para vocês apertarem, se inscrevam porque a gente traz vídeos semanalmente, então por favor, se inscrevam aí na Lume, siga a gente e caso vocês queiram também, compartilhem, porque tem muita gente que precisa entender como que funciona o processo de entrevistas no mundo tech, tá certo? Então, eu espero que vocês tenham um ótimo dia e tchau, tchau!